Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. It's official. The war on tobacco is over, and public health won. Smoking rates have collapsed across Western nations, and the tobacco control movement is celebrating its greatest victory. No, wait, it's certainly not. Instead of celebrating the achievement, the so-called tobacco control movement has fully transformed into an all-out war on nicotine, regardless of the cost to public health and the lives put at risk. In the US, independent vape companies are under siege, and in the UK, once a beacon of harm reduction, prohibition is becoming the law of the land. By demonizing vaping, banning flavors, and destroying small businesses, the fight has left tobacco behind. The target now is solely nicotine. Joining us today to unpack the machinations of nicotine control are two leading voices in tobacco harm reduction, Lindsey Stroud and Martin Cullip from the Taxpayers Protection Alliance out of Washington, D.C. It's great to see you both.
Thanks for having us on.
Well, it's good to have you back on. Okay, we have a lot to unpack today. My first question is to you both, and it's regarding the collapse in smoking across the West. Martin, you're in the UK, and Lindsey, you're in the US. How big is the decline in smoking in your regions, and why do you think tobacco control is ignoring this achievement? And Lindsey, let's start with you.
I was going to sit here and start with Martin. So I do the 50-state analysis. So I've been, for the past 5 years, actively monitoring data from the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System survey, and it tracks adult, smoking rates. And yes, you're seeing a massive decline. You're also seeing a major decline in 18 to 24-year-old smoking. So young adult smoking is, in some states, is actually almost non-existent. And for example, Utah, Rhode Island, both of them, less than 3% of those populations are smoking, which is awesome. It's a public health win. But again, looking at the numbers, you don't see it because due to the tobacco control movement, you see it because of the new advent of different tobacco products. It's 2016 is when you start seeing the numbers really drop. But there's a lot of money to be made in treating people who smoke.
And Lindsey, you mentioned young adults. Now, what about the teens? Because nationally, we've heard that it's absolutely collapsed.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, the teen smoking thing. In a couple states, you can't really compare data from one year to the next. You got to look at the long-term trends on it. But yeah, teen smoking is gone. I mean, at some point we're going to look at the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and we will sit there and see zero people, zero kids smoking a cigarette. Which is pretty amazing. I've been doing the sprint. I've known you for as long as I've been doing this. But 2016 is when I got started into doing this, and that was one of the biggest fears, that was vaping was going to lead to smoking. Well, there's no data to actually back that up. Not any of the real dead. There might be somebody who publishes a study or something, but when you're looking at the trend data, there's nothing to prove that vaping leads to smoking.
And Martin, in the UK, has there been the same type of decline?
Yeah, absolutely. From 2012, around then, I think that's when vapes went mainstream in the UK. There was kind of a perfect free market until the EU got involved and public health got involved. And we saw smoking rates collapse. They almost halved in less than 10 years. It was, and we've had the same thing with youth smoking. In 2012, I think we had 12% of the youth were regularly smoking, because the only nicotine products around were cigarettes. So there was 12%. Now I think all the panic has been about there's sort of 7 or 8% of youth vaping, but the amount of youth smoking is down to about 1 or 2%. So we still have less nicotine use than we did 10 or 12 years ago. But the panic is about the vaping, and no one seems to have noticed. As a Canadian friend, Janine Timmins, often says, "Where's the parade?" Because smoking has almost disappeared in youth in the UK, but no one's talking about that anymore.
Now, Martin, you've written in some articles recently that the actual smoking rates in England have kind of flatlined, despite all these previous declines that have been happening. Why is it flatlining?
Well, this is something that public health has been complaining about for quite a while. Cancer Research UK and Action on Smoking and Health have both said these things have kind of flatlined, and they blame the media. In fact, the Tobacco and Vapes Bill on the committee stage, Linda Bald, who's a public health professor who's on side with harm reduction, said it's bad media. But it seems to us in the UK consumers that the public health authorities aren't really helping that. They're not speaking loudly enough. They're not making the case for vaping. And I think we're seeing now with this new bill that I don't think they ever really wanted to. So, yeah, that is the media, and there's been a lot more media since the start of 2023, but no one seems to be speaking up in favour of vaping, which is such a shame.
So, Martin, does public health give any credit to safer nicotine products for driving the decline?
Very little or none at all, I'd say. They constantly say this is because we've had very stringent tobacco control regulations over the years. It's the same thing they use when they talk about Sweden. It's nothing to do with snus, which is laughable. Oh, no, it's because we had lots of very strong tobacco control measures. I mean, Sweden, for example, is number 53 in the WHO's index for how strong their tobacco control measures are, but they somehow have far less smoking than we do. They have far lower rates, about 40% lower rates of lung cancer and other smoking-related disease, but it's nothing to do with vaping or it's nothing to do with snus. That's always the excuse. They've been very reluctant to give any credit to harm reduction at all.
And Lindsey, in the U.S., do you notice do they actually give any credit?
No, not at all. Actually, it's funny with the Burfus and the Youth Risk Behavior Survey data, it's down right now due to Trump's diversity executive order. They did update their e-cigarette page on January 31st. The only thing that they updated, instead of saying people who are pregnant, it's women who are pregnant, but it's still chock full of misinformation on diacetyl and popcorn lung and everything that's coming straight from the CDC. So you have to begin to wonder why public health groups are so against this thing, that you can start seeing the numbers. I mean, even tobacco companies have had to go switch their portfolio up because, wow, consumers aren't using this anymore. And it's a public health win, as Martin sat there and said, and nobody's really celebrating it.
So, I believe, after covering this issue for so long and watching tobacco control do what they do for so long, that it's pretty clear to me that it's not about tobacco anymore. It's a 100% nicotine control. Would you agree?
I don't even think it's that. I think that it's actually, I still think it's about tobacco. I think it's because there's a lot of money to be made to treating smoking related illnesses. In Hawaii had a hearing last week, and you heard it from these people with the cigarette tax. And now Hawaii hasn't increased their cigarette taxes since 2011, but they still have a higher cigarette tax than most of the rest of the country. But it's all funding. They want more money. And you put cigarette taxes in place so people would quit smoking, and then you have governments that start to rely on these cigarette taxes. So then you start seeing, you bring in an invention that really completely revolutionizes smoking, and gets people to move off of it, and there goes all the money.
Martin, what do you think?
I'd say the same thing. It's money. People have called me cynical many times because I've always said, you can't trust these people. They're only interested in money. And we've seen it more and more. We never heard anyone talk about controlling nicotine. It was always smoking, smoke-free this, smoke-free that. And now, in fact, I think it was the day before yesterday, there was a study in the British Medical Journal, Tobacco Control Journal. It was co-authored by Janet Hook from New Zealand, who's one of the biggest New Zealand zealots that there has been, and they were saying maybe governments should now look at nicotine-free society instead of a smoke-free society. So they are turning their guns that way, and the only reason you can possibly think of is because they kind of realised that smoking going out of fashion. Well, they could be out of a job very soon. I mean, who needs tobacco control industry when people are just going into a vape shop and buying themselves a vape or buying themselves a nicotine pouch, and smoking is going out of fashion very, very quickly. So what are they going to do? Well, if they can pivot onto nicotine instead, they've got jobs for life, aren't they?
Martin, the UK obviously was once the world's leader in tobacco harm reduction. Now it's criminalizing nicotine, banning disposables, potentially banning flavors, and slapping on new taxes. Explain for our viewers exactly what is happening in the UK and how did the UK go from a model of common sense to a prohibitionist nightmare?
Again, it's just the way our public, there are, don't get me wrong, there are still many people in this country in public health who are very much in favour of harm reduction. They're still there, but they're marginalised now. It's the top, the higher ups, if you like, who have gone completely differently. When the Tobacco and Vapes Bill came about, there almost seemed to be a three-line whip. Everyone had to support it, and they want this smoke-free generation. They really want that. That's the main part of the bill. But they're not saying anything about the vapes parts of the bill, which are going to cause catastrophic results. You said about the ban on advertising, ban on certain flavors, ban on disposable vapes, everything. All of these things are going to make vapes far less appealing in the minds of the public. In fact, that's already happening. You see it now just in comment sections on social media, and people I know in the UK, just by seeing people on the street, you can now actually see more people smoking than you did maybe 2 years ago. And that should be an absolute disaster for these people, but they really don't seem to care. In fact, many of them, I think, this is probably what they wanted all along. I mean, for example, Ash, years ago, they lobbied the EU back in about 2012 and said, when the EU had its Tobacco Products Directive, that vapes should only be available as medicinal products. And they said they should have a maximum of 2 milligrams of nicotine. Well, that all changed because the government was saying, no, we're going to go with vapes. We're going to see how they work. And they worked fantastically. But now this new drive has come about nicotine. They're all on it. They're massively on it. You see some of the stuff that they've sent to the Public Bill Committee. Ash, for example, used to say you can't ban flavours, you shouldn't sort of make these things less appealing to smokers. Now they're coming out and they're saying they fully and strongly support vape bans. So, we have a smoking ban in the UK. They're now saying they fully support a vaping in public places ban. That's what they're actually saying now. And the only reason they object to a few things, they say, no, we should still support vaping in medical facilities only, where it helps smokers to quit. So they're quite happy for vaping to be banned everywhere except in smoking in places where it's like smoke. So they've kind of got their medical only aspiration by the back door, because they're saying you should allow people to vape in stop smoking services and hospital clinics and things like that, but we shouldn't have vaping anywhere else. And they said, and I mentioned this, they said they strongly support vape-free policies, as in hospitality and public places. They actually support vaping bans in the UK. Public Health England, around about 2016, came out with a guide on vaping in public. What they categorically said, vaping and cigarettes are completely different products and they should never be treated the same. And now we have public health authorities like Action on Smoking and Health and others saying, well, that's fine, you just throw the vapors out with the smokers. So they're going against their own public bodies' evidence and their own scientific studies of these things and saying, no, that's fine. They've completely abandoned that now and they think that's perfectly okay, which is not.
Lindsey, during your research for your 50-state analysis, you monitor state-level debates on vaping. Do anti-vaping groups present statistics that influence policy decisions? And if so, how accurate are the numbers being used?
They're the only ones whose numbers that they do use. Last week, for people watching this, we were recording this on the 7th of the previous week. I threw numbers out, and I had Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids that came after me, and where are your numbers? Oh, we don't know where they got their numbers from. If you're looking at Hawaii right now, they are relying on 2017, 2019 numbers. If you're looking at most of the states when they're talking about the youth vaping epidemic, yes, they are relying on those numbers. They're not relying on the updated 2021 or the 2023 numbers. And their numbers do go far because they're all saying the same number. So, I mean, that does, when you get an army together and they're saying the same thing, yeah, that's very powerful for Well-meaning lawmakers. Sorry, I got a different word I call them, but for broadcasting, I'm gonna get in trouble if I call them. I'm not gonna drop a bunch of expletives that I'm not supposed to use.
Yeah, I don't have a bleep button at hand, so
Yeah. Well-meaning. Hey, and I can sit here and say this. I have in my previous job, I did work for lawmakers, so I'm good at doing the numbers. I figured out how to present them to them so in ways that it would make sense for them. They can't balance a budget, but I can tell them how many kids are vaping or smoking.
So beyond the numbers, I mean, the claims that some of these people make, in local, debates and so forth. Are they just insane, crazy claims, or just the same old, which, by the way, in this day and age are insane?
Well, it's the same old, same old. You're gonna still hear about popcorn lung. You're gonna hear, youth vaping epidemic is still that is running rampant, even though vaping is down. At least it's like 60% down since 2019 for 2024 numbers. Between 2019 and 2021, youth vaping actually did decline by 20 or by 45%. And I mean, they're so effective though because they are united on the other side. If you're going to a state hearing, and us on our side of the aisle, we're all saying like random things that are really different, and those people on the other side of the aisle keep saying the same thing over and over again. And to a lawmaker that like he's got other bills, he or she's got other bills that they have to deal with. Yeah, it's effective. And they're still running wild with it.
Yeah, they're still running wild with it. So you put together this great, not only do you do the 50 state research and analysis and so forth on the data, but you've also been looking at what legislation, anti-vaping legislation is being put forth in these states. When you look at the states, which one is the worst of the worst and what's being peddled?
Hawaii. Hawaii's got about like 20 bills so far, and they've got preemption for our viewers that don't know about preemption that it's whether the locality can impose stricter restrictions than what the state would impose. They've got God at least like 8 different preemption bills, but they got flavor bans. Hawaii so far is the worst state that I've seen. I'm still waiting. It's really weird because we haven't seen like your usual suspects that are going to do the flavor bans that you've seen in previous years. So that'd be like Vermont, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, don't you know? And haven't seen any. I'm sorry. I worked for a state senator in Minnesota. And I lived there for a little bit of my life, but I haven't seen them actually drop the flavor bans. This is the year of the tax, though. When I did the numbers between 2022 and 2023, there's about $1 billion in lost cigarette tax revenue in the state at the state level. And I even had to tell one of the tobacco companies, I was like, just prepare for it, boys. Like, we're going to see a bunch of taxes. And even they were kind of surprised by it because they thought, oh, it's going to be good. And it's like, no, it's not. And yeah, so you're seeing a lot of cigarette taxes, seeing a lot of vapor taxes. You're also this new thing. There's competing heated tobacco product taxes coming out in the States, even though we only have one product, but you've got different companies that are coming in and quote unquote educating our lawmakers about heated tobacco products. Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation, and obviously the whole youth vaping epidemic is alive and well. Keeps me and Martin employed.
And let me ask you about that technique that they've done with those bills that restrict sales only to FDA authorized devices.
Oh, the vape directory bills?
How big of an impact is that?
I mean, honestly, I think it's more of an impact to, if you're looking at some of these states that are enforcing it, it's probably more of an impact to the taxpayers on this one. I mean, I understand it. I completely get it. Like, I get, like, you've got 34 products that have been authorized, getting FDA permission. Those companies spent billions of dollars. Here's the Wild West of a lot of products who didn't even inform the FDA that they were selling these products, and they're making billions themselves off of it. But at the same time, you've also seen such a mass rate of people like quitting smoking. So it's a catch-22 on that one. The vape directory bills, though, I mean, my boss, I had to yell at him about getting us to be against it and go on the record against it because we've been sitting here saying that the PMTA process sucks. Now you have the state that is pretty much endorsing this PMTA process. And at the end of the day, it's just going to be a cost of taxpayers. I know in Louisiana, I was reading about 2 days ago, Louisiana actually had to go buy a warehouse to store all of the illicit vapes before they destroy them. And why they destroy them too, they just light them on fire. So you're lucky you're not in California. That would have started a whole big thing. But I mean, and I get it. I mean, there needs to be some sense of regulation. This is not the way to go on it. But you can see the tobacco companies are changing their tune too. If you look at Altria, they went from like last year being like, oh, illicit vapes are killing our business to now actually sitting here saying FDA needs to authorize more products.
Martin, with the UK's war on vaping, what are the prospects for meeting the smoke-free goals?
Well, I think the smoke-free 2030 thing is unachievable now. It has been for quite a while, but now it's quite laughable that they can. I mean, it's less than five years away. It's just not going to happen. We've seen smoke-free in Sweden. Because they have snus, a natural experiment across the EU, but they won't even admit that that's because of snus. So you're not going to get that. And this tobacco and vapes bill, they call it world leading. It is world leading because no one else has tried it, so there's no evidence behind it. But they know very well that this tobacco and vapes bill will cause more smoking. It will cause a massive increase in illicit trade. In fact, the impact assessment of the bill says it itself. It says 29% of people, because of this bill, will return to smoking who are vaping, or will go onto the illicit black market. It's really quite bizarre what's happening. I mean, they've talked about in the bill committee hearings that some of the MPs have talked about, well, why don't we make it a nicotine-free society, as you were saying earlier? And it would be laughable if it's not so serious, because you think, hold on, people have been using nicotine for 12,000 years. 1/8 of the population smokes. In the past, there have been, dictators who have impaled people on spikes because they smoked. They've thrown them in the water, they've executed them, they've excommunicated them, and they've carried on using nicotine. Are these people seriously thinking they're the sages? They're the ones who can finally do it just by the stroke of a pen? No, that's not going to happen. We are going to have a massive illicit black market. Talking to people before this tobacco and vapes bill came out, half the market in this country for vapes was already illegal. But what they're going to be doing with the disposable vapes ban and the tobacco and vapes bill is going to basically ban the legal market in disposable vapes, leaving only the illicit market. And they're going to crush the vaping market with the bans on advertising, the bans on different flavors, and the vape bans that they're talking about. They're going to make everything less appealing about vaping. So you have people with vaping will go back to smoking. People won't go onto vaping who are currently smoking. There's no way they're going to get to smoke-free 2030. It's impossible. But I think they know that. Like I said, the impact assessment has already told them that, and they don't seem to care. It's now becoming more like a religion than a scientific endeavor. They just don't seem to be worried about that. You had the shadow health secretary saying to the public health secretary when she said, why don't you make, instead of just a smoke-free law, why don't you make it a generation age ban on nicotine as well? It's easy, is it? It's just a bit easier. I mean, and the thing is, they go through this whole process and they keep saying, oh, we're following the science. They're not following any science. They're ignoring their own commission reports. They're ignoring all the evidence, all the science, and they're just doing it anyway. So it suggests to me that they don't really actually care. And yeah, smoke-free 2030, I don't think they even think of it anymore, because it's seriously not going to happen, and they know it's not going to happen.
How much of a role does Michael Bloomberg play in these recent developments in the UK?
All of it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm interrupting on this one. I warned Martin 2 years ago about this. So it's like, wait for Bloomberg funding to go over to your side, go across the pond, literally, because, you can't, there's no youth vaping epidemic anymore in the States. Martin, you take it away.
Well, yeah, this tobacco and vapes bill was first announced in the dying embers of Rishi Sunak's government. I mean, he was a desperately unpopular prime minister. He was going to lose the next election anyway. And he met Michael Bloomberg in July last year. And then all of a sudden, he's come out at the Conservative Party conference when people are thinking, please give us a policy that we can get behind and get elected again. And he comes out with a smoking ban. I mean, this has come from nowhere. And then Labour have taken over with their new government, and there's not a ban that Labour Party MPs have ever disliked, and they've gone running with it as well. We noticed in the country, consumers noticed a massive uptick in anti-vaping stories from the very start of January 2023. We know that The Guardian took money off of Bloomberg because they told everyone they were getting money from Vital Strategies, and I'm pretty sure there's 2 or 3 other newspapers who are getting money from Bloomberg as well. So you can suspect it's in the UK. We know that they already fund Bath University to the tune of $20 million to spread smears and lies about vaping. So yeah, it's fair to say that Bloomberg has probably had a lot to do with it in the UK as well.
So, Lindsey, how do you account for the fact that your country is exporting such poison through Bloomberg?
Oh, how do I account for that when I've been yelling at Bloomberg? I mean, oh God. I mean, when you look at the states, yeah, the United States is the largest e-cigarette market. Just because the India or China, but you can't get data out of them because technically they're banned there. But Bloomberg, you got to give him credit. He's actually very good at what he does. He's done a lot of stuff, even outside of, vaping. If you go to like the Sierra Club, he's the one who shut down all the coal mines in America, the trans fat and, sugar soda taxes. He's behind it. America, though, when it comes to vaping, a lot of the world does look at us. It's us in the EU when you're looking at like vape regulations. And a lot of them are in the FDA specifically. So, I mean, I apologize for Bloomberg, but, obviously we kicked him out of the country. It's not my fault that he's got billions of dollars that can go other places. Kick him out of your country, people.
Well, actually, indeed. I mean, didn't Pakistan do something like that just recently, Martin?
Yeah, Pakistan did it. Philippines did it. They all found him, interfering with their governments, writing their laws, breaking the law, breaking their constitution. They don't care how they do it. It's and they have been caught out. And some MPs in this country, in the UK, should probably wake up and smell the coffee, because they're being misinformed on a massive scale, making idiots themselves, quite frankly, in the UK Parliament, and really making the UK Parliament a really bad place to do democracy. I mean, the Tobacco and Vapes Bill, the way it's carved up is quite embarrassing for somewhere which claims to have the mother of all parliaments. The evidence was terrible. The committee was, I think, 16 of the 17 members of the committee voted for the Tobacco and Vapes Bill. They didn't take any evidence in the evidence sessions from anyone who might educate them about vaping. They didn't consult consumers. They didn't consult industry. They didn't consult anyone. All they want is people who are going to tell them what they want to hear. And that's really embarrassing. And if for people who say, oh, it's only vaping, who cares? The same thing is happening in this country with the assisted dying bill. They've done the same thing. They've carved up the committee hearings. They've only hearing evidence from people who agree with them. And if you can't have a proper democratic process and scrutiny of a bill on something as important as assisted dying, then you're in a very dire place, and your government is in the wrong place, and it really should look at what it's doing, because you cannot run a country with a government that bad.
Lindsey, what about the 20 Zyn products that the FDA authorized just this year? Isn't that a good sign?
I think it's a sign of Brian King trying to maintain his job, actually, and also kind of counteracting the SCOTUS case, the Supreme Court of the United States case, with the de facto flavor ban. I mean, it's a nice sign, but it took him 4 years. It's welcome. I don't think it's a turning point when you're looking at FDA authorization. And it's going to be interesting too. I've been keeping my eyes out. Like I know there's a lot of media about the nicotine pouches, but I have yet to actually meet somebody who's actually quit smoking using a nicotine pouch. They tend to be more dual users. And where the hell are you at, Stan Lance, on this one? And you've got a kid factor. It's like young kids. But I don't think that you're ever going to see like what you saw with vaping. with kids like sharing them with people because you can't share your pouch.
Lindsey, some believe that President Trump will save vaping in his second term, but he was the one who banned flavored pods in 2019. Should the industry put their hopes in Trump? And I'm going to preface this with a clip that you sent me to show. Here it is.
A lot of people think vaping is wonderful, it's great. It's really not wonderful. That's one thing I think we can say definitely.
That, of course, was President in the Oval Office on 9/11, 2019, when, basically, I don't think he knew what he was talking about then. You could argue, of course, that after that, he did the roundtable, meeting at the White House. He certainly seemed to be more educated. But are you concerned that he might not actually deliver?
He wasn't educated even after the roundtable. He came out with the reactionary flavored pod ban, which is why we have disposables. Welcome to the market. And he has an R behind his name, but doesn't understand that part. I mean, it's good that he's talking with the industry. Unfortunately, you've got really big players now. Reynolds was Donald Trump's one of his largest corporate donors during his election, his re-election campaign. So, and Reynolds hates disposables. So it's going to be interesting what happens with Trump. But like I've said it for years, I never thought I've worked with Republicans. What happens when you start out as a staffer, you work for one side of the aisle, they don't really let you go over to the other side of the aisle. And I remember getting into this game and I was really curious about why everybody was banking on Republicans, especially when you're looking at people who smoke. They tend to be downtrodden people, lower economics, lower education. Those are the bread and butter for Democrats. And Democrats too, if you get them on our side of the aisle, they do work out really well. Julie Casimiro is from Rhode Island. She's a state representative with a D behind her name. She was one of the first people to throw her name out on a flavor ban bill back in 2019. And she got harassed on Twitter and she showed up to a vape shop and completely changed her mind, after getting educated about it. Unfortunately, I don't think Donald Trump's being educated. So no, I don't bank on Donald Trump. And actually it's even worse. Donald Trump's election is why state sessions are so bad this year, because you have all the states that are going to react. And anything that you do at the federal level too, Donald Trump's already indicated that the states can have their own choosing when it comes to abortion. It's going to be interesting to sit here and see what he does with THR and stuff. If you're giving them the right for the women's right to choose, is going to be decided by the states. Okay, well, what about adults' access to safer alternatives to nicotine?
That's a good point. That's a very interesting point. Just last question on this. I mean, what about the team that Trump is putting into place? HHS secretary, new FDA commissioner, Bhattacharya for NIH and so forth.
God, I mean, the only thing is that doesn't matter. I mean, if you're in 2009, Congress gave the FDA control of tobacco products. It's not. The president can't just walk in and sign an executive order away with the TCA Act, okay? I might not be a lawyer or any of that one, but I do know a little bit of constitutional law. I did study government. And so I don't really think that you're going to see a wide sweeping change. And actually anything that's going to happen too, it's going to go through a rulemaking process. So you're still going to have 2 years of public comments before anything actually gets, signed, sealed, delivered. You got nicotine. But I don't think, again, now, so the FDA is way too big. Martin and I presented to the Reagan-Udall Foundation back in 2022, and that was over both their nicotine products, but also their baby formula. And the FDA, I mean, you're looking at other stuff that the FDA does is way more than just tobacco. That's their newest center.
Martin, Lindsey just mentioned Republicans, right? Of course, in our discussion about Trump. And on your side, you mentioned the conservatives. Why are conservative-natured politicians so hell-bent on banning vaping?
Well, part of it is because of all the misinformation. I think a lot of conservatives seem to think vaping is exactly the same as smoking. Because of all the media, they just believe what they read in the newspapers. I noticed during the second reading of the Tobacco and Vapes bill, there was quite a few MPs who objected to the bill, not because of the vaping aspects. They objected because of the idea of ever rising age that you can buy cigarettes. They said this goes against freedom of choice, civil liberties and everything else. So they've objected on a principled objection there. But I heard at least 2 or 3 MPs on the Conservative side say, oh, the vaping stuff is fine. I'm happy with that. No problem with that at all. But the smoking thing, I want to object to that. So they're objecting on different grounds, but they're not bothered about it. So they seem to think, and the way the committee is talking about this thing during all the amendments they've been going through is as if smoking is exactly the same as vaping. And the way the bill will come out will be, I'll give you an example on these. They said they can have powers to make places vape free, but the only consideration they said they can't be made vape free if they're not already smoke free. So what they're saying is, you can ban vaping wherever smoking's banned, but you can't make smoking worse. Can't make vaping worse than smoking. That's the only control they put on it, as if to say the committee wants to make the controls on vaping worse than smoking, but we're not going to allow that. And that is apparently their liberal side of things, you know. I mean, but you talk about Republicans and Conservatives. I think it's a good question about Conservatives because it speaks right to the heart of what's wrong with our government at the moment. Because we have the leader of the Conservatives now, Kemi Badenoch. She voted against the bill. She said, no, we shouldn't be doing this. And she voted against it at the second reading. But 2 of our MPs are on the committee, and they are the most aggressive anti-vaping MPs in that committee. You know, one of them I said was the one who said, well, we should have a nicotine-free society as well as smoke-free society. And she's a Conservative, not a backbencher. She's a shadow health secretary, and she's the one saying these things. And that just shows you the Conservatives are all over the place. They're not an effective opposition. And we have a Labour government which is deeply unpopular for what it's done. And so basically, people are just thinking, who on earth are we supposed to vote for here? The 2 main parties are both as nuts as each other at the moment. None of them seem to know what they're doing. So, yeah, it's a deeply political thing where the British public is confused. You know, who do we have a Labour Party or do we have a Conservative Party? Do we have any party that actually is looking after the people? And I'd say at the moment, there isn't one.
I'd like to turn our attention here now to the World Health Organization and the WHO's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, because, of course, you know, all 3 of us actually did a bunch of coverage last year for COP10, and COP11 is coming up later this year in the fall. During the opening session for COP10, the head of health promotion for the WHO, Rudy Kretsch, made a pretty strong comment, and I'd like to play it right now for us here.
The overarching theme for the FCTC COP10, Together Promoting Healthier Lives, is an extremely important narrative that is not only a priority for WHO General Program of Work for the next couple of years, it also serves as a good basis for mainstreaming WHO FCTC into various health and development paradigms. While significant progress has been made in recent years, there is no room for complacency as this program is uneven. The moment a government believes it has won the battle against tobacco, the industry seizes the opportunity to manipulate health policies and promote their deadly products. E-cigarettes are the exception to these positive trends. Here, we are increasingly seeing data showing a rapid increase in uptake by children and young people. For this reason, WHO issued a call to action in December 2023, which urges strong, decisive action to prevent the uptake of e-cigarettes based on the growing body of evidence of its use by children and adolescents. We continue to need a health promotion approach to tobacco control. Countering tobacco industry tactics necessitates the successful promotion of health and well-being through complementary and essential approaches, such as health in all policies, whole-of-government approaches, and whole-of-society approaches.
So So the WHO considers nicotine such a drastic issue that we need to have a whole of government and a whole of society approach in order to stop the use of nicotine. And I mean, that sounds to me that like all of the legislators are looking for a nicotine-free society are barking right up the WHO's tree.
Yeah. Well, what he said was very misinformed, and that's a generous interpretation. When he says a growing body of evidence, there is no growing body of evidence. All the evidence points increasingly towards vaping being a very good harm reduction product. That's the only way the evidence is going, but they like saying that. But as far as the all-government approach, that's something the WHO has said for a long time. They have said that they don't think it should just be health ministries talking about things to do with tobacco control. It should be everything. It should be the Treasury. It should be the Trade Board, the Transport, everything. And it's trying to insert themselves where they really have no place to be, which is why I think there's a lot of people who are very concerned about their pandemic treaty, because if they're talking about a whole government approach to that as well, that's probably why they're getting a lot of pushback. But they've always tried that.
Well, their responses suck to the pandemic treaty. If you look at the way the WHO handled the pandemic, wow. Oh, it came out of China and they pretty much were like, oh, we're not going to do anything about this. When you look at the FCTC, it was supposed to, when they envisioned it and they created it 20 years ago, the anniversary is going to be on the 28th of February for the FCTC signing it, making it official. They were supposed to reduce the harms of smoking. It turned into this, we hate big tobacco. I mean, and they stand really, really hard with that section, was it Martin 5.3, right? Like no tobacco industry interference. And it's the only thing that you see. Like I call I call tobacco companies, they're like the pedophiles of the regulated industry. Especially when you have, like, for people that are watching internationally, like in the States, when you can get convicted of a child sex crime, you are put on a list and, you can go to jail and you do your time and you're still, facing your crime. And that's the way that the tobacco industries are treated. And they have done their time. We've found out they lied to us in the 90s. They went on trial and guess what? Every person who smokes is paying that price. Literally, that's called the Master Settlement Agreement. Every other country has pretty much the same thing. And it's funny when you look at the tobacco industry too, they've been spent years, right? Government trying to get them to change their products for years. Excuse me. And it was the consumer. That's the one thing I love the most about vaping and THR in general. It truly is a consumer-driven revolution that actually got even the biggest tobacco players to really change their products. If government interventions didn't do any of that, taxes, whatever, pass them down to the smoker. Sorry, Skip. People who smoke. But yeah, but I love it. It's going to be interesting to watch how it goes. And with the WHO, I don't know if you saw, Argentina is now getting out of the WHO. Good. America was never a party of the FCTC, so Martin just has to work on getting Britain out of there.
Martin, you got a last word here on WHO?
Well, I'll agree with what Lindsey just said about this is with vaping and harm reduction. It's a consumer-driven revolution, and this is something that these people like the WHO and public health authorities are trying to counter. They constantly talk about the vaping industry as if that's an evil thing. But for example, in the tobacco and vapes bill, they were saying this bill is going to get rid of these horrible products that have got games on them and they look like thumb drives and they've got cartoon characters. These things are already illegal. They are the illegal products that they've been sold because the government couldn't enforce the rules they already had. So they're trying to create this demon of the vaping industry when the regulated vaping industry has done absolutely nothing wrong. They're exactly what Lindsey said. They're consumer-driven associations. They're people who have quit smoking using these products and want to help other people quit smoking. They're not an evil industry. They've never made cigarettes. They only make things to help people quit cigarettes. So I think that WHO and all the public health side with their Article 5.3 have always not wanted to debate, because they know if they debate, they'll lose the debate. And they're trying to now do the same thing with the vaping industry by trying to create a demon of them because they don't want to debate on the evidence. They don't want to listen to the science. They're only interested in winning the debate and keeping the money flowing into their coffers. That seems to be all they're interested in. And unfortunately, public health can go hang, and people's health can go hang, and people can die as far as they're concerned because they don't care.
It's so funny with how much with the FCTC that they hate tobacco companies, all the policies that they push actually benefit the tobacco companies. They tend to be the only victors at the end of the day that are able to go sell somebody an alternative to smoking.
Yeah, just on the WHO, but the WHO recently, Dr. Tedros did a speech at the executive board where he talked about how proud the WHO was to help Vietnam ban not just vapes and heated tobacco, but possession of vapes and heated tobacco. And in doing so, they protected the cigarette trade, which is owned by the Vietnamese government. They actually protected the nationalized tobacco industry in Vietnam, and they boasted about it. That shows there's something very badly wrong at the central heart of the WHO, if that's the kind of thing they're doing.